Please welcome writer and co-director Ahte Zhang.
It's always good that there's a big spot.
Yeah. So do we have any questions? You guys know how the drill works. I'm not going to go through it again with you. Any questions for our director, writer? Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can tell a lot about what you just said. The film certainly was not in our minds when we made it, the other film, because the story is very much based on my own life, and I was early 20s. And of course that happened in Holland, but we transferred it to England. And so virtually everything that you saw in the movie has actually happened. In different variations, of course, not exactly the same way as you see it here, but many things were true. Just as a background thing.
Yes, ma'am. Why was the setting changed from Holland to England?
Very stupid practical reasons. We could get the money in England. And then we could make it in England and we couldn't get it made in Holland. So, and that's a good enough reason.
Yes, sir.
I did or he did? I lived with the Vida, I lived with her for 9 years. So they have a future. And I hope they will actually do better than I did.
Yes, sir. The questions about how the co-directing works.
Of course, a very good question, a very legitimate question. It's a bit ironic because after the Blitz, after the bombardment, which was extremely badly received in Holland. Now, I don't read reviews since my second film, so don't read them for the last 35 years, but you have friends. And the friends tell you, you shouldn't read that because they say this and this. And you shouldn't read that, so you know everything they write without reading it. So I also know that you shouldn't take reviews personal, but it is not funny when they're really that extremely negative. So the best remedy against a film where you really get butchered that much is to make, as soon as you can, make a new film. But the weird thing was I also thought I should learn something from all these bad reviews. And one of the things that I realized is that I don't really represent the audience that goes to the movies anymore. My filmmaking has become rusty. So it has become my choice to co-direct. I thought if I co-direct with a younger person, and young is relative, of course, but it's clearly a younger person that is more in touch with the way films are told to another audience, that could be in the best benefit, the best interest of the movie. And that's why we did it. And I can only say it was an extremely positive experience. It's something that I enjoyed very much. It was also very practical. It's a relatively low budget film. So I concentrated on the actors because I knew the characters very well. I never told the actors that it was actually me and people I knew. They only heard that after we made the film. But I could concentrate completely on the actors, while Emily concentrated on the visualization. That meant that we had discussed every shot, because, you know, acting is always in relationship to the camera, so you can't say one does that and the other does that. And she sort of corrected me during the acting, so she was sitting behind the monitor. I don't like sitting behind a monitor. I want to stand next to the camera and talk to the actors directly. So sometimes, then she whispered to me, "It looks like Coronation Street," which is about the biggest insult you can have in England. And of course, I said, "Oh, you can't say that. You should never say that. You should say to the actors, it's very interesting, but maybe we can try this and this because their character such and such. You can't say it's Coronation Street, Anyway, so we had a division in our tasks, and it worked extremely well. And but the main reason to co-direct was that I felt it was good to have another vision in the visualization. Thank you.
Can you tell us about the use of the animation within the film as well, how that came about and how that worked?
Yeah, the animation, it came out of the script. Originally in the script, Arthur was a documentary filmmaker. But then we had the problem that it's very hard to show somebody who's good in making documentaries. While in animation, you can do it much more economically. You have a few shots and you see immediately somebody is original or talent and that sort of thing. And Emily found this animator from New York, and he was happy to do it, and it didn't cost us an arm and a leg, and he was very original, all that sort of stuff. So that was great. And then because it worked so well, we started to use it dramatically, because there were certain scenes we just flat out didn't have the money to pay for. So we thought, you know what, let's animate them. It was practical. And the animation is basically the idea behind it is whatever Arthur can't express in words, he animates. So his feelings about the people that he knows and that he talks about or that he thinks about or whatever, he animates those and expresses his feelings in those animations. And that's the source of the animation.
Yes. Another question.
Oh, thank you. I can't say that, but I agree, of course. There's one question there.
Yes, please. Could everyone hear that question? It was about the use of the costumes and how it. She's wondering how the costumer got that together to kind of represent the characters very quickly.
Yeah, well, it's a very sharp question. It is ultimately, of course, it's the talent of the costume designer. But the thing to do is to talk about the characters. I made very specific breakdowns of the characters. And then discussed it with every head of department, but certainly with the costume designer. And then Emily weighed in on that because she was more on the visualization side. And we always told the head of departments that, and the actors also, of course, also like, the film is about acceptance and forgiveness. And it is not only, you don't only have to accept somebody else's behavior, but certainly your own behavior. You don't only have to forgive somebody else, you particularly have to forgive yourself. That theme was, of course, used then combined with the fact that you have a very well-to-do Jewish family against a very relatively poor laborer family. So all these things thrown together brings the costume designer at a certain point to a certain design. It's particularly very good because she couldn't really spend a lot of money. So what happens very often is that they go in their own stock that they have. Many costume designers have a stock of their own, and they go into the wardrobe of the actors themselves, which is a little bit easier with the Jewish family because those actors have a little bit more money. With the family from Port Talbot, I mean, they're very good actors also, so they didn't necessarily have the right stuff in their own closets.
I was wondering, did you have a real Leon in your life?
Did I have a real one?
Leon, the character?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And also what people very often ask, two other things they very often ask is the funeral. It was, my mother couldn't get, when you get a coffin and it's in a house, the lid isn't on. At the moment that the body leaves the house, the lid is on. So it is about this much thicker. and we couldn't get it out, so it went through the window. And the other thing people say, oh, the peanut butter, oh yeah. Well, that was there for about half a year. Yeah. And it cost a lot of money for somebody to clean it up. I didn't clean it up.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely, it's absolutely true. It's my experience that when somebody dies that's very close to you, as you probably noticed, that every sibling in the film after a parent died has to have a reaction. Not so much the father or the mother; they are constant, but every sibling changes. You know, Leon goes back in the army. One of the girls goes back to drinking alcohol. The other one starts the nail salon. Everybody has. Alan is. It comes out as gay, which indeed happened that way. So everybody has a specific reaction. It's a little bit stronger in Wales, which you very rightly noted, that they have these wakes. They have they tend to laugh a lot. But certainly my experience is also that during those times of enormous pressure, there's a lot of jokes. There's a lot of laughter. And it's the same like with not a lot of people talk about it, but I think everybody feels that after the scene of the funeral with the father, that you have the animated sex scene. It is one of those weird things that if somebody dies that's extremely close, the urge for sexuality, basically the urge for intimacy, is enormous. Anyway, that's the way I experienced it. And so these things hark back to basically the experience that I felt. It's one of those things that I sometimes say, like, if you have I almost want to say the luck to have grown a little bit during the years that you've lived, I now sort of understand death, but I still don't understand life, and that's still to be found out during the film.
Thank you for that comment. Any other questions? Yes. The question is basically, why didn't you subtitle all the Welsh speaking?
Actually, I don't know why we didn't. Well, there is a reason. I mean, if somebody, I spoke in my family when I grew up, we spoke a different language than Dutch. We spoke Frisian, which is in Holland, but nobody else speaks it and nobody understands it. But we lived on the Flemish border, which is like as far away from Friesland as you can get in Holland. It isolates other people. So if somebody comes in who speaks only a specific language, like this is with Welsh, a normal British person will not understand Welsh. So Vida would be isolated. And the same way Arthur is isolated on a cultural level when he gets into the family of hers. So we felt that not subtitling it might give the audience more the feeling that he is in being excluded. And we also felt that though they give certain information, that the body language actually should be enough to understand it. It's always been my feeling, not everybody shares it, but I think dialogue is not really that important. Dialogue is only another form of body language. If you have to be able to understand the film without dialogue, it's not really completely true, but in big lines it's true that the way people act, the way people walk, the way people are dressed and all that should say as much about a character and the dialogue. And that was one of the reasons why we didn't subtitle it.
Yes. Other questions? Yes, sir. The question was, what was the reason for all the rooftop scenes?
Probably a money reason. Very bad reason. But you know, when you make a film as this, it was shot in 15 days, but I never really like to talk about budget because you like a film or you don't like a film, and how much money it costs doesn't really matter. But from a practical point of view, you limit the amount of actors, because otherwise, you know, you can't logistically do it. You limit the amount of locations. So we basically had like 4 or 5 main locations, and it is the parents' house, and both parents, it's their apartment, and it's the rooftop, and it's the memorial site. And so when you make a film like this, you don't do like just one scene on a rooftop, because then you don't fill a full day. So you make enough scenes that you fill a complete day. That's the reason. Very, very undramatic reason.
I was curious, when Alan and I both first screened this movie, I had no idea who Johnny Flynn was. I didn't recognize the name. In this 6 months or so that followed that, I started seeing his name a lot. Was he kind of a little less known when you got him in that role?
You mean Johnny or Lydia?
Johnny.
Johnny. Johnny had done Song 1 with Anne Hathaway.
Uh-huh.
He's done another European film, Sales of Mary. Oh God, I forgot the title. Mm-hmm. But so he's done a few films. He's particularly well known in England as a musician. So he plays this modern kind of folk music. All the songs in him are all his friends. We could never have had these songs, but he arranged them for us, and which was extremely generous. And after the film, he did Einstein. He did Genius. Right. So he shot into the stratosphere. But Lydia, for instance, did Star Trek Beyond, right. And she's great in it. The only disadvantage she has there is that she's in such heavy makeup that I'm not sure if people will recognize her from that. But she's a marvelous actress. I was very lucky. They knew each other very well. They had been in a play with Juliet. So they played together in a play, and Juliet was one of them. And because they were a little bit nervous about the kissing. But then Lydia, who knows Johnny's wife very well, talked to Johnny's wife and said, "Oh, no, we were married for so many years now, you can kiss him as much as you like, you know." There wasn't a really problem there. And it was great because it was easy to rehearse with them. I mean, when you don't have a lot of time, rehearsal is very essential. And I love actors, and I love directing actors. And so I rehearsed with them. And at that point, you don't really rehearse the scenes in the film. You take 1 or 2 scenes from the film, you use the dialogue, and then you start to do other things. So I, for instance, let them play with their backs against each other and then do a love scene while they can't see each other. Or I put like a shawl around their heads. Well, you probably know this painting from Magritte, where 2 people kiss, but they actually have a shawl around their head. Well, when you can't really see each other and you have to do a love scene, it is going to be totally different. The body language is going to completely change. And all these things are, weirdly enough, not that important for the acting. It's only important for the trust, because if the actors trust you and they're willing to do weird things, they're certainly willing to do that when you're shooting. And so with a little bit of luck, when you have that trust, they trust each other and they trust you, and they trust that you will tell them in all honesty whether it's good or not and whether or not it works. Then you don't really have to say that much anymore, because they at a certain point know the characters better than you do. So I was extremely lucky that I had this advantage, that the actors already knew each other, and that they were willing to rehearse, and that they were willing to do stupid things, because it helps a lot.
Thank you very much. Ata Dajan,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks very much.